Hello, and welcome to episode 13 of Into the Spotlight. I'm Morley.
And I'm Ryan. Today's episode is about exploring the differences and nuances between filmmaking and video creation on YouTube. This has been an episode that we have both been discussing a lot recently, so that we can examine each other's craft and how we produce and approach projects from different perspectives. I, for one, have been looking forward to this since it delves into a phenomenon that I have studied a lot and has also played a large role in making the creator's documentary last year.
Yeah, I'm excited for this conversation. I was telling Ryan before we hit record, um, I've talked to some friends just in passing about how it's really interesting comparing your perspective with making film and like loving film and my perspective with creating YouTube videos and how different our perspectives are. I mean, just even on the little collaboration we did for the tripod strap video, I remember you sent me a text just saying like, um, when you edit this clip, just let the pan stop and pause before you cut to the next shot. Like let the movement settle before you cut and move. And I was like, oh wow, I hadn't really consciously thought of that before. And ever since you said that, I've been integrating into my videos and thinking about it every time I make a cut. And I feel like it's made such a difference. Like just that small perspective and sharing of that information.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, I remember because like we were trying to figure out the nuts and bolts of like how we were gonna do the collaboration video, and I remember, yeah, like I was kind of being the overbearing producer, kind of sending kind of like time codes and all this stuff through messages, but it's just something that I've learned over time. It wasn't to be kind of like critical or anything in that regard, but it's just a matter of like the language of editing is so different, especially between like video and content creation on YouTube and from a more filmmaking, larger media, um like for like television and other formats as well, like documentaries, short films, and others. Like the editing language is so different in each of them. And one thing that I just developed on my own over time is just like learning how not necessarily cutting all the time and just letting kind of like the image play out can just
Mm-hmm.
feel more just can feel more fulfilling that way. And then when you cut to the next one, you kind of feel like you get a full sense of like what this image is, and then you can process it and go to the next one. Like, and not in a
Yeah.
way that lingers too long, but in a way that just feels like you can at least show people, especially because like I was hiking up the mountain and like it was such a beautiful day. There's not a cloud in the sky. I thought like, oh, we gotta get as much wide angles as possible, just to
Yeah.
show off my hometown as much as possible.
Yeah, that's something I've definitely been working on recently. Like number one, because of like that collaboration, but number two, in just of my own personal development with my videos. I've realized that like because my videos are mostly showing the process of a build, when I first started out, my strategy was basically like squeeze everything into the video, like squeeze everything into somewhere between 6 and 14 minutes. And as I've made more and more, you realize that that's not really the best technique, because you don't need to show every single step of the process. You can show cutting a piece of wood, but then the viewer will probably realize at a certain point that, oh, that pile behind you of cut wood means that you cut the rest of those pieces as well. There's a certain language that you learn in showing processes. Um, and so I'm working on a video right now of making this leather pencil case. And I love what you said about it can be a lot more fulfilling if you let the shot settle, because that is exactly what I'm experiencing with this edit. The whole kind of mission of this video is to make like a very, very relaxing video. So like
Right.
I feel like my last couple of videos, maybe three, I made the Halo Health Pack first aid kit, the Pulp Fiction wallet, and these 3D printed concrete planters. Like they're all kind of very exciting projects, I think. Some with voiceover, some like with thematic music. And I felt like I needed to kind of like recenter and have like a simpler project, like really focus on the beauty of the process and leathercraft, which is kind of like one of the things that first got me into leatherworking. So I went into this video thinking like, I'm really going to capitalize on this, try to make the viewer feel like they just meditated or just like walked through the woods, like feel really, really nice. So I'm really trying to be intentional about not cutting at the bare minimum, like letting a shot linger and setting the scene.
Yeah, it's interesting because the editing language is so can be so personal to each individual, and especially in terms of like just what the subject matter of the project is. So like when you're talking about your videos, like it can be really hard, especially as like I don't know if that's how you felt starting out. It's like knowing what to show, what to reveal, and what to kind of maybe skip over and get to the next shot. Like you're showing like the wood cutting on this part, do you need to show like the next 5 shots showing that, or maybe like you can assume that people will make the connection and then you can go to like the next part of the project. It's interesting how you mentioned how you were trying to fit your videos into like 6 to 14 minutes. Was there a specific reason as to that?
No, I just say that, and that's literally the range of length of my videos. I really subscribe to the philosophy of like a video should be as long as it takes for that video. I mean, that's
Right.
very circular reasoning, right? Because as long as it takes is not really a as a reason. Like as long as it takes should be like it should be engaging throughout the whole video. And
Yes.
for a 20-minute video to be engaging the whole way through in a YouTube video is really difficult. I mean, I don't know if I could really do that at present. That's basically like making a TV show.
Basically,
Um,
yeah.
it's a little easier to make a short video more engaging. And that kind of segues into something I was going to talk about, which I feel like is one of the biggest differences between filmmaking and video creation in the context of YouTube. In that I feel so much pressure to make the very beginning of the video incredibly engaging, like have this
Hmm.
super strong hook, because it is so easy on YouTube and other platforms to click away if something is not interesting. And I see it in my analytics. But if you go to a movie, you're not going to stand up at the very beginning of a movie and walk out of the theater if the beginning isn't interesting. Like you have a certain amount of buy-in. In fact, you're not going to probably do that at any point in the movie if it's not engaging. You'll have an opinion at the end of the movie. And maybe that, I don't know, maybe that's changed with streaming when it's easier to click away from things. But I,
Right.
I believe that people still have a certain amount of buy-in with movies in the same way that they do with podcasts, like with us recording right now. It doesn't have to be a banger right off the bat. We don't have to come into and be like, hey, what's going on? Morley and Ryan here. Let's talk about stuff. You can kind of slide into it a little easier. So that's something I'm a little jealous with of the field that you are in filmmaking.
Like it's never easy constructing the beginning, constructing that hook, because even then, like even though like you said, like at least you could, if like the hook isn't as compelling as you first desired to be, there's still a chance with like a film or a documentary in the sense that you can build that back up as the project keeps on going because you have that benefit of time on your side. So that's the
Yeah.
perhaps one of the hardest thing was I was trying to do for the documentary creators. Like I'm not sure if you remember, but like I tried to put the perspectives of like of all guests at the very beginning, and then we have the title card, and then we kind of lean in, then we go off by one. We start with Dave, and then Megan, and then you, and then keeps on and so forth. So, but like trying to construct that, like I understand your videos, so you show, or at least I know in a lot of your videos that you show the project like its completion at the beginning, or you give it like a tease of it, and then you go into delving into like how you're making it from beginning to end. That's really interesting because there you're still playing with that temporal structure. And it's like just to go back to editing for one moment, it's just this idea like it's always hard just when you're putting all this together because like for example like a film could start off with a really compelling intro and keep you hooked along the way, or it can start a bit more, be more of a slow burn like a mystery film for example, and it just keeps on ratcheting up the tension that way. And the same thing with a documentary, like you don't want to just especially if it's like more narrative or mystery oriented, it's hard, you have to find different ways of do it's all different ways of doing setups and payoffs in each one.
Mm.
Like as you're editing this together, it's not always easy to put these projects together because as you're editing, it's almost like well it's exactly like you're trying to find the right moments of like when to cut and when to go on to the next scene or to the next shot or whatever. Like it's not something that you can always see or hear, it's something that's felt as you're watching it and knowing when to
Yeah.
cut at that right moment. It's practically invisible, but it's like you have to know in your own head, in your own heart, is like when to make that next choice to go on to the next part of your story.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with writing. And that's why like I always try to focus on the writing process a lot, because even though it's mainly the blueprint, it's a blueprint that once it's there, you can at least experiment within that structure a little bit to help you get you to the story that you need to do. Like that's for one thing with creators. Like I put a lot of research into this, a lot of research, a lot of books that I read, a lot of papers, a lot of YouTube videos that I watched to the point where I had to take a break from YouTube for a few
Yeah.
months just because I watched so much of it in prepping for this. So yeah, it's interesting how we're just able to approach them from different angles. I mean, especially with your videos, they're a lot more shorter, and that way, like in the way you have to keep it more condensed. You gotta keep that momentum going from beginning to end. And I guess in some ways it can be sometimes easier, but also more difficult doing that as well. And so they can say in like a 7 or 8 minute long video.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's all about in both what filmmaking and in YouTube video creation, it's all about building and relieving tension. That's
Right.
something I really learned in the Halo Health Pack video was I wanted to make the music of that video inspired by Halo. So that kind of like Norse choir and war drums and stuff. And so that was like the first song that I chose. And then as I was editing it, I imported another song like that that was very intense, a lot of drumming, a lot of like Norse choir, and it was too much. Like there was no reprieve for the viewer. Um, so I realized that I had to insert a slower song that kind of gave the person a moment to relax. Um, and that has been like a big growing experience. And I think that's true in every media. You know, it's like you have it on the micro scale, like in a small YouTube video. You have it even over the course of a series, like in a book series. Eden and I are reading Harry Potter together right now, and we keep joking like the fifth book is an absolute slog. It's
Right.
so like it's just like everyone's angsty. It's the longest book. Um, and I don't know, maybe I'm giving J.K. Rowling too much credit, but maybe it's necessary. Maybe you need
Well,
that to build back up into the excitement of the last two books.
exactly. Like I've noticed that with like TV, like even TV shows, because they tell these stories over like, maybe, they could be 10-hour long movies basically. And sometimes like, after like, you finish all the plot points, you kind of need like a few episodes or a season to kind of build that back up. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
just watching the series The Crown, and a lot of people were kind of like meh on season 3 because they changed the actors, they aged them up with new actors, and they felt that it's not as compelling. But like a lot of it was set up for what season 4 is, with the drama with Diana and Margaret Thatcher and the Queen and everything else. Like it needs that setup in order to have that payoff at the end. Because if you dive right into it too quickly, it's maybe not be as effective. And I think that's one of the biggest or not the biggest problems, but one of the biggest challenges with a lot of my projects that I do is is structure. There's a quote from a filmmaker, I can't remember who, but he said that every film needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. They don't need to be in that order, but they do need to be there. So, and that was one thing, one of the biggest challenges, and even just trying to figure out with creators when I was making, when I interviewed you and Dave and Megan and a few other academics from my program for this documentary, was trying to, how do I figure out the structure? Like I knew right away that I wanted to have it like intercut between the perspectives of all the guests, of all the people who are appearing on the documentary. So like we start with you, and then we're focused on a topic, then it goes to Dave, then Megan, then back and forth in that way. And I was feeling kind of like nervous, thinking like, because I prepared all the questions, and all the questions I asked you guys were very detailed in the sense that like they were all about the different topics of what the documentary was going to be. But I was scared, is this going to sound like too much like an essay? And
Mm.
I was also kind of wondering, because I never made something of like this scale before, with all these different types of individuals with all of their different backgrounds and stories and perspectives. Like, was I going to be able to link them all together in the edit?
Yeah.
Would it make all sense? I remember as I was editing it, I spent like a whole month in my little dorm room trying to put it together, thinking, and like when you're editing for a long time, you can kind of go down the rabbit hole wondering like, oh my gosh, does it make sense? Is it the best thing ever? Is it the worst thing ever? You're
Yeah.
trying to
You
keep
kind of
that
lose
sense of,
perspective.
yes, exactly. But I felt like, okay, listen, I've done the research. Like that's the problem. Like there's never ever a strong guarantee of something. Like you could write the best thing in the world, but until you actually make it and put it together and see it for the first time, only then will you be able to finally get a sense of like what you did worked or didn't work. You
Hmm.
can't plan it out and say this is going to be good, this is going to be bad until you actually do it. And that's the one thing I actually had to confront was you just have to be able to have faith in what you've prepared, do your work, do your homework, do your research, and once you have an idea, once you have confidence in the structure that you've made, then you can go out and put that together. Because even like there's still room to edit with it as well. I could change the structure around. And even one part, I moved one section of the documentary to the beginning and the other part to the end, and it just flowed better that way.
Hmm.
So it's a matter of just understanding of being prepared, but also being flexible enough to make adjustments on the fly when you need to. And that can be a bit hard, but structure and understanding that sense of pacing as well as you're putting these clips together, it's very, very important. And that's something that was a very big undertaking for me because I never made such a documentary like this before. Even when I first got to Ryerson, like I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but I didn't have a concrete um, approach on how I was going to effectively do this, like how I was going to plan it out. Like at first, I thought I was only going to have like one content creator that was going to follow around. Then ballooned into like three creators and two academics. Okay, and how was I going to put all these perspectives together? That was a challenge. It was kind of like a Rubik's cube, but I'm happy I figured it out because I was really focused on getting the structure right. And even when I was watching it a few days ago, I felt like, yeah, I'm happy that I got the structure right with it.
It seems like making a compelling documentary would be more difficult than making like a compelling fiction film or short film because you have so much power with the edit, and but you're working with like the constraints of like real life and all this real footage, and it's up to you to make it all interesting and flow together, assuming something like incredible doesn't happen during the filming that you can just kind of capitalize on.
Well, that's kind of like the magic and the risk with documentary filmmaking is that like, and because you're working with real life people, when to a certain degree what you see is what you get. People say like people change when they're in front of the camera, but after a few minutes they kind of just act like themselves, and that could lead, you could find something, something could, a certain situation or a moment could arise that you never could have imagined that could make or break the documentary. It's really incredible in that way. And the thing is, like with documentaries, it draws more upon, like, you can be a lot more flexible with the structure of documentaries
Yeah.
because you can pull from all these different sources and moments, from the sit down interview to you following them in a certain event or situation, to having b-roll footage, archival footage, other sources of footage that you can label over and narrate. There's a lot that you can do with it, whereas narrative films follows a certain set of narrative conventions coming from theater and literature and from the history of filmmaking that we have until this day. There's a certain expectation when you go to the Cineplex and you're going to go watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood because it's Quentin Tarantino. You already have these preconceived ideas of what you think it's going to be and what it should be.
Mhm.
Whereas with a documentary, unless it's like a major series like the Seven Up series, you have more room to kind of play around with it. So there are different ways of doing it. One, they could seem more chaotic than the other, but it's all part of the fun, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean they can take so many different forms, right? Like there's like Planet Earth is technically a documentary, and they create drama in Planet Earth with like this cheetah chasing a gazelle, and in the same way that like Icarus is a documentary, and they have a storyline from like blood doping and the world of cycling.
Right. And like
It's
all
such a
the
diverse field.
Yeah, and all like the murder mystery documentaries that you see on Netflix, like how many of those are around? But like once you see one of them, you kind of get a sense of like, oh, what it's going to be like. It kind of sets the tone for what's going to be. And
Yeah.
right now, we're really living in the golden age of documentary because films have always had distribution models, but documentary didn't really have much of that. Documentaries didn't really play in theaters that much unless it was at your local indie cinema. Now it's on Netflix and Amazon and everywhere else. It's really, and YouTube, especially in Vimeo. It's great to see.
It does seem like documentaries are having a golden age. It's kind of interesting to think why. I mean, I think Serial, in terms of podcasts, like Serial kicked off like the true crime murder podcasts that are so widely loved now. But even like film documentaries as well. I mean, now there's a theater in Toronto that solely plays documentaries, which I know was kind of a gamble, but it's done very, very well.
Right. Well, I mean, it's true. It's just, and also like the budgets for documentaries are so much. larger now. Like I don't know if you saw the recent one on Netflix, The Social Dilemma,
I haven't seen it yet. No.
but it's quite interesting because they actually have like film scenes with actors and they have like a lot of visual effects and everything. And it's like, oh yeah, this is like a corporate documentary, which you never thought you would say, but we're at that stage now, which is, and it's not a bad thing. But it's nice to see that it's really well recognized now, and there's so much to see, and especially like, nature documentaries, and that's one thing. Like, if there's any process that I learned from the documentary that I made, because I went into that, like I went to Ryerson having a rough idea of the subject matter that I knew that I wanted to do, but I didn't have a hard, concrete, realistic, or well, not realistic, but a more like that sort of in the weeds production pragmatic approach on how I was going to make that documentary. And the thing I'm happy about now is like after making creators, I now know what I want to do or how to do it for my next project. And it's a different subject matter. I don't want to reveal it here, it's too soon, but it touches upon elements of nature and history
Hmm.
and home and place and meaning and memory. And I see now as I'm planning this out, like I know I can see the scenes in my head of how it's going to look, how it's going to play out. And I had a rough idea of that with creators, but not as fully formed as I do now preparing for the next one. So it's all a learning process, and you're never going to get it right the first time you try these because these are hard productions to do, but it's always something like as you grow and adapt, you can foresee things as before they happen and you can prepare accordingly. And like I know like the people I want to interview and how they would react to certain situations. I'm happy with where it's leading to, and I can't wait to get started soon.
Yeah. That figuring out that how is so important.
Yeah.
I mean, it's learning how to express yourself in the way that you want to. I feel that so viscerally in each video I make. And
Yeah.
I find that I do need to be very intentional about during the filming, like trying out different camera angles and asking Eden for her input. And actually, on the video I'm working on right now,
Hmm.
um, I asked her to like, hey, can you like take the camera back and like take some dynamic shots and stuff? I mean that alone just adds so much. Just not having the camera on a tripod. Um,
Yeah. Like you're doing like a lot of movement shots, that sort of thing,
Not
handheld.
a lot, just one shot. But like I kind of like we talked about in the episode with Andy, like I like trying just a couple new techniques per video. Like not changing a ton, but just that incremental improvement. And something she had said about recently about one of my videos is like, I love the macro shots. The macro shots are nice, but it can get too much at a certain point. Like I think we all kind of it's easy to fall into these patterns of like you love something and you do a ton of it and then it's too much and you have to back off and you have to kind of change perspectives. So I
Mm.
tried again to be very intentional about that. I'd be like, okay, this next filming, I'm going to do a lot more wide shots, set the scene, kind of like we were talking about earlier, establish where I am in the relationship of everything,
Mm.
and not so much fast jump cuts. But it can be so easy to just fall into that rut, especially like in making YouTube videos where it's just constant production um, of like, yeah, this is what I'm doing, this is what I do. But
Right.
it's you can't really grow very much doing that.
Well, exactly. And it's all about like it's different in your case, and that's what's so interesting in learning about YouTubers such as yourself and others is that sense that like you don't have like the media or not always have the media training or background like I did, for example. Like it was such a core part of my university studies, but like you've made and you've really grown and your style has evolved so much with your videos, which has been really impressive to see. And not only just in your videos, but I've seen you have expanded into podcasts. We started this podcast, you're the host of another podcast, you've done collaboration videos. um, the one really cool thing I've seen that you've started doing is where you add these cool little commentary audio tracks to some of your project videos, which is a nice
Oh, like
little
the
supplement.
record scratch freeze frame.
Yeah, but it's really cool in the sense that you do that because like I watch your videos. Your videos are very relaxing to are really relaxing to watch. You see how the whole process of your project is built, and you film it well. The music's great that you choose for it. But like for any sort of maker or tune that, of course, that we've interviewed on the show and others, who want to learn more about how you built that project, that's such a neat sort of addition that you've added to that. So, and that's wanted to ask you because like you've been doing this since your McGill days,
Mhm.
and you just been learning and learning as you go and seeing other makers do how they do their videos. How is that? how do you feel, and that's in this place where you are now compared to when you first started?
I feel like a different person. Not literally, but like just in terms of how much I feel like I've grown and developed. I was actually just thinking about this week. Like, I feel like I could comfortably make a video a week now, and that's what I've been doing for about the last month. I think the last 4 videos have been one a week, and looking forward to the next like 4 or 5 projects I have planned. I was like, yeah, that could be a sustainable thing to do. Um, yeah, no, it's been great, and like we talked about this on Clamp, my other podcast. Like, I also feel like podcasting has been such a great dovetail into all these creative pursuits. I'm not sure if you felt this as well, but number one, just like talking about the whole creative process and everything is fantastic, but needing to be eloquent about it as well is really good. Like putting your thoughts into words. Um, there's something that's very helpful about that. I don't know if you ever find this, but like you feel like you have this very coherent thought, and then when you try to say it to someone, it like doesn't really make any sense, and you're like, oh, I
Oh,
guess that thought isn't as developed as I thought it was. But when
yeah,
you're forced to really be on the spot, like literally we're doing at this moment,
yeah.
it makes you kind of um, realize what you need to say and what the thoughts in your head and what it all kind of means a little more. So I mean, I don't know if you felt that as well, but I felt like it's led to a good amount of personal growth in needing to talk through this creative process.
No, I agree with that 1,000%. It's helped a lot with like me just allowing me to kind of just like slow down, take my time, just properly process what it is that I wanted to say. Like for example, like that last episode we had with Awesome was just like I had so many ideas going on like just a few days before that I was just writing down that I was excited to talk about. So just being able to, like you mentioned, learning from people and hearing other people's ideas and their perspectives on their creativity, like that sticks with me for a long time. Like I'll be thinking about that for a week, and I'll just be writing something in my room, and then I'm like, oh wait, this kind of relates to this little project I would like to do. It's nice being able to just have that dialogue, to have that conversation, that back and forth between creatives like ourselves and others that we've had in the show and people that we will continue to have on the show as time goes forward. But it's helped me really kind of like think about like just how I articulate my ideas, and that's really helps with like the pitching process, which will be handy for me down the line if I'm ever in front of producers or financiers. I'm like, here, I have this idea, and then like this is what it's all about in 30 seconds or in a minute or something like that. So it's really good in that way. It's really helped me just kind of slow down, take a moment. This is my big idea, and then just kind of being able to put it out there and feel happy that I put it out there in the way that I did.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it can be such an individual in your head process creating something.
Hmm.
And it's really good to kind of bring other people in on it. Um, and I think I've talked about this before. Like I've historically had a little bit of trouble like taking criticism and constructive criticism, and it's something I'm trying to actively work on, um, and not be so like knee jerk defensive about it.
Yeah, because we're very protective of it because these are our babies. We spend a lot of times on these projects. We care about these projects. We want everyone to see them and appreciate them, and for them to do well, and that everyone loves them. But it's kind of like something I touched upon last episode, which is like, if it's fulfilling to you and if it makes you happy, then it's already a success.
Yeah,
Point blank. Like of course there will always be people who won't like it, but if you were happy with the way that turned out and the way that you achieved it, no criticism can take that away from you.
for sure.
And criticism, and like sometimes a critique could be good. Like I've had some harsh critiques on like some short films and short docs and music videos I've worked on before, but it's just like sometimes it can be handy. It's like I may not like what you said, but I agree with it, you're right, and that can help me fine tune my process for things down the line.
Yeah, and I think the key is just not taking it personally. Like all criticism, I think a good perspective to take on it, and something I'm going to try to do is it can either be useful or not useful, but you should try to make it not like affect your own emotions. It's kind of like what Awesome was talking about, like
Yeah,
depersonalize, taking your ego out of the work.
yeah.
You can choose to say like that is good criticism, or I see what that person is saying, but it's not relevant, or it is misguided, or whatever else. But
Well,
it's not an attack on me as a person.
No, exactly. And not all criticism is the same. It's like sometimes, if something is an insult, that's not a criticism. That's just a nasty insult. Whereas someone who takes the time to kind of says, I like that, or, but you could be improved by doing this, and they kind of explain their perspective, I'm like, okay, that's interesting. That kind of challenges my thought process in a way that I enjoy that. I enjoy that sort of, that friendly confrontation, I guess you could call it. you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
but no,
Keeping it friendly is key.
exactly. But like I think that's like a big thing on, on YouTube, like, because I talk about like my projects and showing them in front of like peers and like, small audiences and everything else. But like on YouTube it's a different ball game because, you have comments and thumbs up, thumbs down. Like what was it like kind of like adapting to that? Or like do you ever get used to that? What is that like?
Well, it's funny, like you asked me a similar question during your documentary,
I
and
did, yes, I did. I did.
my answer is mostly the same, and that I feel really, really lucky that I've gotten mostly positive comments, um, which I see as like a really good sign for the future of my YouTube channel. I was like, I'm just thinking like the mere fact that most of my comments are positive seems to bode well for the future, considering how many negative comments can be out there in general. You could also take that as the fact that like, oh, only if you're successful on YouTube will you get those negative comments, and that some people take the negative comments as a rite of passage. Like, oh, I've made it. I'm
Right.
getting these mean comments. Um, but no, I think kind of like I mentioned earlier, like, I mean, I do get some comments that are just like ridiculous or miss the point completely.
Right.
There's this thing that happens on the internet where people like analyze something in such detail that was so minor for you, and they analyze it in a way of thinking that like you could go back and change it. You're like, I already made this project. I already made that decision and did that thing. Like, I'm not going to, I didn't put my entire, let me give a concrete example because this is a
Right.
little abstract. Someone might say something like, oh, those screws look terrible because you didn't hide them. Well,
Oh my
for
god.
well, number one, that's an opinion. Like, it's an aesthetic choice.
Right,
And
exactly.
number two, like the fact that these screws are visible is not the end of the world. It's a very minor issue in the grand scheme of things. So I think a really big key mindset wise is not allowing someone to take an issue that before they said it did not matter to you and making that issue matter to you.
Hmm.
Like you can't let someone else's analysis of a thing make it matter to you. Um, it can make you reconsider it and think about that like, oh, well, I'm going to think about that going forward, but it shouldn't elevate that thing in your mind to something that is going to take over your psyche. I think that's a good way
Yeah,
of thinking about it.
that's exactly the right perspective. I think that's something I always apply to because before, like, I was kind of like, so worried about the idea of like criticism and critique and like, oh, if this doesn't work, it's gonna be, that's it, I'm done. I'll never work in this town again, sort of thing. But it's just but like then once you get it, it's like, oh, it's not that bad. Like,
Yeah.
it can be really helpful, or if it's really, more personally insulting, but then it doesn't affect you because it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
just it.
I think the like more so than the negative comments as like a small creator, like as I am like a relatively small creator, the difficult thing is you think something is awesome. A video that you've made is incredible. It's the best video ever. And you're like, this is going to blow up. And you put it out
Right.
there and nothing happens. That is what is a lot more tough, is the
Right.
resounding silence that can happen sometimes. And it's totally outside of your control. That is a continuous learning process as well, as figuring out how to think like some things do well. This thing didn't do well. I can try to learn from that. Maybe it wasn't as good as I thought of. Maybe I was deluding myself and thinking this was really big, or maybe it was really good and it's just the algorithm was not in my favor
Yeah.
on that day.
Yeah, it's all
And
about, like, in that world, it's all about gaining that sort of traction and views and
yeah,
everything else. And like that's tricky because now YouTube, I mean, the YouTube of now is not like the YouTube of just not even 5 or 10 years ago. It's changed so much. There's so many people on it, and it's a corporate platform at the end of the day. They will tailor certain popular content to the top that they will find more beneficial for them. But
yeah,
it's but at least but like you've created or you've connected with like quite a large community of makers, which has been impressive.
and like that is one of the most fulfilling things is when someone says like, gives this very personal comment and says like, this inspired me to want to take my 3D printer and start using it with leatherworking. Like that is an
Right,
incredible,
right,
incredible feeling. Or you met like with Makers on Zoom having coffee group, like you develop these connections that blossom into really, really, really great relationships. Um,
yeah,
yeah, it's like keeping good perspective and focusing on those more positive things is good
right,
because it's a grind, right? Like I think the only, not the only, but like the way I approach it is like I just want to be really prolific. I want to be always making stuff, always improving, trying to put out stuff as much as I can. Um, always feeling like the one I made this week is better than the one last week, and spreading out my nets, hoping that I am in this little corner of the internet, I find some passionate subscribers. In this corner of the internet, I find some passionate subscribers, and everyone is coming together to become Morley Kurtz super fans, looking out for the next video. It's just
yeah.
it takes time.
It does. It takes time, and like there's so many YouTubers, like especially the ones who are very popular now. It took them years before they could gain that sort of traction, and for some of
Mm-hmm.
it could be just like the luck of like a really good viral video that was like right in that right time frame, or is like about public popular subject matter, and then it just blows up that way. Like how many times have we seen that? But that's a really good point that kind of transitioned to something I was wondering about because you talked about how you feel you're in a place now where you can make a video every week. Like to me, like making these projects to me like even if I were to do like vlogs and stuff, like I would take my time with them so much because I'm always so focused on like what am I going to say and how am I going to do it. Like I'm too much of a meticulous sort of perfectionist, to kind of have that steady output. And you've been really impressive putting your videos out there at such high quality. But there's a phenomenon on YouTube that I see where people are very um, focused on trying to catch the algorithm, ensuring that their videos are seen. And once they get to a certain range of popularity, they feel like they can't stop that. And they always have to feel like they produce like, one video a week, or maybe even two videos a week if they're really dead set on doing that. And this leads to something called burnout, in which the content creators just has to stop and go on a big hiatus because they've just
Yeah,
went down this rabbit hole of creating content that they weren't really that happy about. Then they get blowback from their fans saying, "Oh, this isn't as good as your old stuff. What happened?" And it kind of leads to that sort of problem.
right.
That was something I wanted to explore in the documentary that I just didn't have time in the end. But like, there's one YouTuber I know called Elle of the Mills. I don't know if you've heard of her, but
No.
she's a very good sketch comic sort of YouTuber. She does vlogs, but in this really funny comedy style. And she was highlighted by Casey Neistat, and she got really, really big. And then eventually, at some point, she had to just stop because she just got burned out because she was so focused on making content that it just consumed her life to the point where she had to stop, take a break, and start making videos again at a steady pace. So that's something I always kind of wonder about. Like, have you ever felt that sort of sense like I'm really doing this a lot, or like am I pacing myself with these videos, with these projects? Am I doing enough? Am I not doing enough? How do you feel about that?
I think it's a trade-off because I could make more videos and more projects. I compulsively, not compulsively, I consistently other C word. I consistently underestimate my own productivity. It's something I'm realizing about myself. Um, but I'm trying to be very intentional about choosing projects that I really am excited about. I think that is the biggest thing for me to avoid burnout. Something I was looking at this week was I have the opportunity to sell some of my leather work at a local cafe, but I don't really want to do it because I want to focus. If I'm making physical items for sale, I want to focus on things that are highly customized, very personalized, that I hopefully could also make a video on, rather than make a few $100s making a bunch of the same, actually not even make, potentially make a few $100s making a few of the same notebook covers or wallets that may or may not sell. Um, so yeah, it's like I could kind of like what I'm trying to come around to saying is that I could be making a lot more videos of a lot more projects that probably would be more popular in the aggregate. Um, and I think I would get burnt out doing that.
Right.
So it's choosing your battles. I'm realizing that like, okay, yeah, like I could probably make a video a week, and that is something that will likely help me in my video performance. However, I'm still going to do the projects I'm really passionate about, and not necessarily the projects that the algorithm will highlight. I am going to do projects that I think will kill two birds with one stone and have this great marriage of project I want to do and the algorithm wants to do, which is a very wide range of things. I mean, there is so many people watching YouTube videos that there's an audience for just about everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I've never felt the need to really niche down my channel. I will happily do concrete projects and 3D printing projects and leatherworking projects and woodworking projects, and in the past, cooking projects as well, because I know that all of those things have people that want to watch them. And I know that some of my favorite people that I look at, they do all sorts of different stuff. And that's the type of person I am. I have very wide ranging interests. So it's choosing my battles. Um, I've never really felt burnt out on making my own videos. And if I have in the past, I think I've just allowed myself to take more time because I've never felt like those self-imposed deadlines were the most important things in the world. Um, yeah, I know burnout is like was a really big problem, and I'm really trying not to avoid it. I've always been pretty good about being very conscious of like my mental state and
Yeah.
being well-rounded. I think exercise is a huge part of it. I think just
Oh
sitting
yeah.
in front of your computer for a long time can be terrible for you.
Yeah, it's not healthy.
Getting outside, going for walks is so important. Cooking, hanging out with my cat, switching it up during the day.
Yeah, well, that's all nice, and it's like you mentioned, like I'm the same way in the sense of this idea of like I have a lot of hats that I wear. There's a lot of interests that I have, a lot of things I like to pursue, but thankfully reality kind of constrains me because if I were to go after all these at once, I'd be all over the place
Yeah.
because I'm working. Like it's like I'm trying to do a lot of things at once. Like I'm doing this podcast with you. I'm preparing for my next documentary. I'm working also full time. I'm also just trying to find time to, like you mentioned, just to exercise, maybe watch other films, so I could keep that enjoyment going. But yeah, it's just like that's something I try not to do too because I notice like a lot of nights, like I'm going to bed like sometime at midnight or after because I'm working on all these things, or I'm just trying to just take it easy and come down because I always feel like, but there's always something else. There's always something coming. There's always something coming down the pipe that I need to prepare for or get ready for. So I don't want to, in case something happens, I don't want to be stuck trying to, clean up the mess, so to speak.
Hmm.
So just a matter of just trying to keep ahead of things all the time. But it's hard when there's always something coming that's, forcing you to readjust on the fly. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
hard. It's hard being a independent filmmaker these days, I guess. But,
Well, that's
but
why I think choosing the right projects is so important
yeah.
because like there's certain things that are going to be outside of your control, like the amount of work that you have to do to make a documentary, for example. Like you're going to have to do a certain amount of work. So
Oh, I know.
you might as well choose like the best projects possible, so that you can be passionate about it and that you have the best energy possible. And I think it's something that I think that's actually one of the reasons why a lot of people do burn out is because they're not intentional about choosing the right things to do.
hmm Right. Well, that's one thing I feel like I'm happy about with this next documentary project that I'm working on is that it feels like the right next step for me to take.
Mhm.
Because it's a totally different subject matter. Like I explored, YouTube and content creators and digital media and new forms of storytelling. I'm happy I explored all that subject matter with you and the other content creators in that documentary. It was really fun, really fulfilling. And now I feel like I'm ready for the next step. Like this is subject matter for this next documentary. It's like it deals with history and people and events that I'm very familiar with, and I have a really good idea on how to visualize and being able to tell that story in a very compelling way. Like it won't be shot the same way, be a lot. Like, I'll be filming a lot in the outdoors instead of like inside a building, like I did on Creators. Here I'll be outside. I'll probably get sunburnt every day, but it'll be so worth it.
Yeah.
And it's something I'm really looking forward to because it's something that I feel that can. I just think it could be a really special story, and especially with all the themes that I mentioned before, with how it deals with like nature and memory and time and place and home and all these things. It's something that I feel like it's the right next step for me. Like as I'm working on the more research that I do, it feels like okay, this can be the next one, and I feel it's like, and it's also hard too because we're also living in the time of the pandemic, and like who knows by next spring or summer when I plan to shoot, would there still be any more logistical challenges regarding that? So other stuff to take into account as well. But it's like you mentioned, say like if it's the right project and it doesn't feel overwhelming, like I don't feel totally overwhelmed, which is I'm happy with. And I feel like, okay, I feel like I'm on the right track to this next step, this next project that I want to pursue, and the next story that I want to present.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah,
That's great. I want to get in the weeds a little bit because I saw something on the notes sheet that you wrote that really intrigued me.
sure.
And you had wrote the legacy of the jump cut and new editing styles.
Oh, this is gonna be fun. This is gonna be
Yeah,
really,
so
really fun.
I mean, I feel like the jump cut is the heart and soul of YouTube videos. But I'm sure, as you said, as you're thinking, it came from a very specific place that has been widely grown beyond whatever it was supposed to be. So, tell me about the jump cut.
Well, it's so interesting, the jump cut, because you have to go before YouTube, before digital video, even like going back to like the 90s and 80s, during the heyday of filmmaking. And just it's the idea of the jump cut, also not just in filmmaking, but in television and everything. The idea of the jump cut was regarded as like the most amateurish thing someone could possibly do. Like it showed that someone didn't know how to edit. It wasn't proper. It was kind of like weird. Like it was only something that like abstract video artists were doing of their time period. Then, as more digital cameras came out in the 90s, and then YouTube got started in 2005, and you had this uh, um, whole population of new storytellers and content creators coming online. They weren't all trained in the ways of quote unquote proper media techniques,
Mm-hmm.
and they started using the jump cut. And now, like the jump cut has become such a staple in vlogs and other forms of videos that you see on YouTube. It's now what was something was once considered jarring and amateurish is now considered a core piece of identity of entire genre of videos. That's really cool. Sorry,
So
go ahead.
so we and the listener are on the same page. Are you calling the jump cut anytime there is a hard cut from one shot to the other, or specifically when it is also like a change in scene or framing?
No, a jump cut. Sorry, I should have been more clear about this at the beginning. But a jump cut is like when there's like one continuous shot. Like for example, like you set the camera, you're talking to the camera, and the jump cut is like as you're talking it cuts but it's still
Mm.
focused on you. It's the same shot, so it's like about cutting within the same shot, but it doesn't change to a different shot. It's just like it's like, so example, like you could be here 1 second, you're leaning to the side, and then it cuts and then you're leaning to the other side,
So
or like
like the classic vlog,
the
a lot of
classic vlog.
talking with like it's so interesting. Like, sorry, go on.
Yeah, well,
I'll
like
speak to it afterwards.
yeah, but like it cuts, for example, it cuts and then it zooms in, then it cuts out and zooms back out. That's the jump cut. Sorry, continue because you sounded really excited. I don't want to cut that off.
Well, it's so interesting. Like, you're right. It has become so ubiquitous with people speaking to a camera in YouTube videos. And I was watching a video recently. It was like this really, it was this really interesting data analysis video about like TikTok content houses, like all these like internet influencers who marketing and kind of like production companies will take them and put them in houses together. And it was happening during the pandemic. It was really bad because like it was a lot of cross contamination.
Right.
Anyways, this is like such a roundabout way of coming back to the woman who made the video, did not use a lot of jump cuts. So like she kind of took her time speaking, and people in the comments were like, they said you should edit this down so that there's like no space between when you stop one sentence and start the other. It's like, wow, it's so interesting. Like people expect it now. They don't
Yeah.
expect just normal talking patterns in a YouTube video.
It's just part of the modern editing video language. And what was once considered kind of like, oh, that's weird. Why would you do that? It's like, oh, okay. That's, like people continue following along. And it's not even just in YouTube, but you see it in all different types of advertisements and marketing videos online that are filmed like vlogs. So it's an interesting history of how something was what's considered amateurish is now considered such a major staple. And YouTube has been at the forefront of just changing, and like the way the editing language has been altered and suited to be on that platform for a lot of different types of videos and a lot of different genres. It's just so interesting. So
Yeah.
like exactly. So like on YouTube, like there are a whole new, like the entire generation has grown up watching online video, and to them these editing styles, that once kind of considered, you know, just like unrefined or in that sort of sense, are now considered like, oh no, it's just part of it's just part of its nature, it's part of its own visual aesthetic. For
Yeah.
example, like gaming videos and everything else. It's really cool. It's really, like vlogs. Like look how many vlogs are so different, so unique. Like Casey Neistat's really popular, and so is Peter McKinnon as well. As like in the sense that they use like cinematic techniques to make their vlogs, presentable in that really cool style. Like Casey Neistat uses a lot of drone shots and whip pans and match on actions. Like he comes up, he covers the camera with his hand, he moves it back out, and he's in a whole new part of New York City. What? Whoa! How did that happen? Like it's just cool
Is
seeing
is
how
a
it's all
whip
converging.
is a whip pan when you move the camera really fast and then it goes into another scene?
Yeah, like it's like in the same. So it's like it whips, so like it's blurred and it's moving, and then it stops and it's in focus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like he used a lot of that. He has a whole video where it's just him. For every transition is him whip panning, and he has like a whole like titles explaining how he's doing it. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the convergence of all these styles that leads to new types of storytelling, and that's what so interests me about the documentary. Why I wanted to pursue this was just it was just so interesting to see how the boundaries of storytelling were being changed and expanded upon.
Yeah.
And that's always a good thing. That's not a bad thing. That's always a great thing to see.
Yeah, I mean, although I do think the like using those techniques can get taken too far. Like
Yeah.
when I think there's just like a certain amount of like collective ADD, which is why people like use the jump cut so much. It's like people don't want to wait for the pauses in speaking. They just want all the content right now.
Yeah, well,
And
exactly.
the same thing with those like vlog style ads. Like I can't stand those where it's just like an ad of someone, a selfie filming themselves. And I feel like the more I see, the worse the production quality. It's
Mm.
so interesting. It's like at first they still looked like someone was using like a DSLR, but they were just holding it like the Ty Lopez, like here in my garage, you know.
Oh my god.
But
It's
now
so
there's
bad.
like these TikTok ads where
Mm.
they're not even trying to hide the fact that it's like in someone's bathroom filmed with an iPhone selfie camera.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's interesting, but it's like, but you are right though about how, like, yeah, like if it's overused and it's like a jump cut every 2 to 3 seconds, like, yeah, that could be just annoying to see after a period of time. Like, I would never want to see a jump cut in a movie, like the way it's done in a YouTube video. They should still be kind of kept separate in that way. But just to tie it back to the beginning when we were talking about different types of editing, that's just how I've developed my editing style, was just to just appreciate the image, let it play out, just kind of have this kind of go back to like the 19th century filmmaking techniques where they just filmed random scenes and they just didn't cut until like they were at the end of like the film. Like I
Yeah.
don't want to do it like that extreme, but just there's just something really nice about letting the image play out. And I think, like you mentioned, like we see this a lot now. Like every time we go like on our Facebook feed or on our Instagram or on TikTok or Twitter or whatever, like you see a lot of like videos that are cut very, very quickly, that are only 30 seconds long. And of course, they're made to be that way, either to be advertisements or to get your attention or to, subscribe or follow and everything else. And that's why I think it's nice to have, if you're doing something like a documentary or another type of like short film project or feature film project, is be able to let it play out nicely and take its time, like not take too much time, but at least like allow you to just appreciate the image. Because I think we're bombarded with so many images and videos today where especially the editing of videos, like they're made to cut so quickly, and like and then you see that it goes really quickly, you scroll next, there's another video and it cuts very quickly, and you see you're being inundated with information all the time.
Yeah.
Whereas being able to have a style where you could just sit back and sort of appreciate the image for what it is, and like you're not being forced to like be constantly on all the time, you could just appreciate it, be immersed in it, and then it keeps on going from there.
Yeah. I think you made a good point. Like one isn't better than the other. They're two very different mediums, especially since internet content will largely be viewed on your phone. It's a less overwhelming format and you're scrolling through it. And I think there is a lot of artistry and satisfaction in creating a video with like 1 second cuts. I did that once with a little like Instagram leatherworking video where I made every clip exactly 1 second long
Oh, really? I
and
didn't
only
know.
use the shop sounds. And it was cool. It's like basic, everything kind of blurs together in this one nice thing.
Yeah.
And of course, like the cuts and pans of a 5 minute video won't be the same as they will in a movie because they are so inherently different. Um,
No, well, it's like that. It's like we talked about. It's like the idea of structure and like just also like the platforms for what they're being made for, and also just the expectation of what you're going into are just different. It's like you mentioned. It's not like a question of like one's better than the other.
yeah.
They're just different and better suited for different types of forms of storytelling.
But I do think each one can learn a lot from the other.
Oh, there's always
There's,
trade-offs. There's always
yeah,
trade-offs, and you can always pull, and like that's filmmakers are always pulling from different types of styles and imagery, whether it's through art and other formats. Is just being able to, how do you take one piece from another form, put it into this format that you're doing, and combine them in a way to make it cohesive and effective.
I think of like The Big Short, kind of like that in terms of it. It has these little vignettes where you have some random character or some random like real famous person like Emma Stone explaining the subprime mortgage crisis or something. And
All
it does
right.
seem kind of like influenced by internet videos where it's this like very quick, totally non sequitur transition. And even in some of the editing styles and the sound design.
Yeah,
Um, I love that movie. It's a great movie.
it's very good. But it's you've watched The Boys. You see
Yeah.
that in The Boys a lot. Like, sometimes they're filming like some of the superheroes in The Boys are filming these like really really corny ads or a film trailer, for example, and then it cuts back out, and it allows you to delve into that to see for what it is, and it cuts back out to the show version
Yeah.
of the world that you're seeing as like, oh, I like how they do that. It's very effective, whether it's like a TV ad or like a mobile ad or like even like a film that they're making. It has this really like heavy yellow color tone, color scheme all over. It's funny how they do that.
It's amazing how short a clip can be and you can still get something from it. That's something I've noticed in editing my videos. It's like, wow, if you want to make something short, you have to make it really short
Hmm.
to get that effect of like ticka 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 ticka, like flitting between things. Like your eye does not take very long to pick up the information from a scene.
No, well, I mean that's why like you see some of those ads on YouTube that are 15 seconds long. I mean that is not easy to get that message out in 15 seconds. But we have been so conditioned to this now after so many years of seeing online video and seeing in this format and the way it's progressed to the state that it is now. Like it's not jarring anymore. We're just used to it. It's like part of the idea of the jump cut. Like, oh, it's just part of the aesthetic that we're so accustomed to seeing now.
Yeah. It's kind of freaky. Like I feel like we evolved this way so we would like watch out for tigers that were going to attack us, but now it's those same instincts are being used to watch internet ads.
It's hey, listen, who knew? No one, no one knew how evolution was gonna go. So we'll just roll
Yeah.
with it.
Well, on that, should we transition to what we are putting in the spotlight this week?
Actually, I have one more question for you.
All right, hit it.
Yeah, because you have been really focused on content creation and videos a lot. Like you've been doing a lot since the beginning, but now like you've had like a full year where you have just focused on content creation and just exploring new different types of projects and doing different types of commissions, and you started a podcast with yours truly. I mean, just what are some of the lessons that you have learned after doing all these different types of projects after a year, or at least a year since I've interviewed you for the documentary?
Yeah. Okay, that's a good time scale. So that's been about it's been like a year and a half, I guess.
Yeah.
Sorry to the listeners for the long pause. I'm pondering. Um, I think it can be summarized as like the various ways to play to my strengths. So like as I've mentioned, like as a kid, I wanted to be an inventor. And I think the things that I enjoy doing the most have some element of invention, some way of incorporating a new technique, and not just making something simple or something
Mhm.
that I've seen other people doing. Like I love the process of figuring it out on my own. And I think in sometimes I think of that as a detriment because I will not seek out outside information and instead opt to try something that may not work very well, but I want to do it my own way. So I'm going to try it that way. But I think that is what makes me happiest. So yeah, like finding those things that make me happy, and the sorts of creation that make me happy. Because there's so many different things you can do, right? Like, and that was one of the reasons I had to leave my engineering job, is because it wasn't making me happy. I was not in the right place.
Right.
Um, yeah, so I can't really give a very clear answer to that, but I feel like every month or so, I have this like really solid development where I can be like, okay, this month I learned that I need to focus more on this and focus less on this other thing.
Mm.
Yeah. Maybe I'll have a better answer the
It's
next
not,
time we have a
yeah,
good conversation.
it sounds like it's not just creative growth, but also personal growth as well.
Yeah, it's all intermingled. I can't really separate them from one another.
No, no, but no, it's perfect. That's perfect.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
so after the heavy, heavy question, it's time to go to what we're putting into the spotlight.
Yes.
Yes.
I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah, sure. So my into the spotlight for this episode ties to a lot of the subject matter that we've been referring to in this episode regarding digital video and new types of storytelling and everything else and filmmaking. It's a documentary called Side by Side. It's a documentary that came out in 2012, written and directed by Christopher Kenneally, and also hosted by Keanu Reeves, who conducts the interviews. So you really gotta watch it now. And and it's a really interesting, fascinating documentary. It's one of the first documentaries that I watched in about, well, not one of the first documentaries I watched, but it's like one of the first documentaries that I watched that gave me the idea to make my documentary creators. A documentary that delves into um, the debate and the discussion surrounding uh, film and the rise of digital video for filmmaking. And it interviews a wide range of cinematographers, film directors, editors, and other people in the film industry on the significance of how digital video is impacting filmmaking as it's in itself. And it shows all different types of perspectives, showing the pros and cons of film and of digital filmmaking, and also what it could mean for the future. What gave me the idea to do my documentary is that at the end of this documentary, Side by Side, is there's a scene where director Barry Levinson says, as digital technology continues to change, the nature of storytelling will also continue to change in ways that I won't even understand, and this becomes a giant revolution. And when I saw that, when I was in Christmas of 2017, it just gave me the idea. I was like, oh, I want to do my documentary about that. That's a good leaping off point into the subject matter about content creators and new types of storytelling. So it's a really interesting documentary. If you want to learn more about the technical and visual components of filmmaking and really understanding like how important it is in the job as cinematographer, how film cameras and digital cameras work, how they're used each differently for editing, color correcting, how they develop the image as well. Hearing different types of filmmakers' perspectives on why they like film and digital filmmaking better. It's a really interesting documentary. So if you want to learn more about that technical component of filmmaking, it's a great documentary to dip your toe into. So that's my spotlight.
Cool. I really like to watch it. I'm so curious about how certain cinematography techniques that we take for granted are remnants of the realities that cinematographers had to work within with like film cameras.
Oh, and they do. They talk a lot about that at the very beginning of it, and just how the photochemical process is this 19th century invention that they were still working with up until like about the 2010s. So it's interesting
That's
hearing their
wild.
perspectives and how it took time to develop the image, or how directors would direct a scene, but only the cinematographer would really see, because he was like operating the camera. And he says, "Oh, it's a good shot. It's a good shot. It's all in here." And then they would have to like wait until that later that night to see the dailies of the film that was now processed and see it on screen to see what it was like. And
Wow.
now we can just see that now with like when you're making your YouTube videos, for example, you can see what the image is already going to look like before you record. It's a really interesting to see the digital revolution on filmmaking, and I think you will like it a lot.
I find it's sometimes too easy to take too much footage, not just because it's a lot to slog through in the edit, but I find it when I'm taking beauty shots of like my projects, like the shots that I'll use for the thumbnail or for the compilation at the end. It's just like it's you can use it as a crutch to take away from your critical thought process and being like, I'm just going to take a bunch of different pictures and try different things instead of taking a step back, thinking about how you should set up the shot. Because it's not a replacement for that, but it's easy to try to use it as such.
Well, exactly. And a few filmmakers even mentioned that, like Richard Linklater, Christopher Nolan, like you only have like a limited amount of film. So it's like it gives everyone a sense of like, okay, it's showtime. We gotta get this right. It's not
Yeah,
like
sense
where
of
you can just
importance.
practice forever. But at the same time, if you need to practice forever, then you can do that. So
Yeah,
it
definitely.
doesn't present as either or as better or worse. It just shows the benefits and the some of the drawbacks to either approach, and allows you to kind of make up your own mind. But at the end of the day, it's always good for storytelling, especially for people like us, to get the means of production and to express ourselves in our own ways.
Definitely. I would not like to make YouTube videos with a Super 8 camera. That's for sure.
I have a Super 8 camera actually. I have a 1972 Kodak Brownie just in the other room.
Ooh,
Yeah, it's fun to
cool.
play with, but I haven't found a way to have. I need to go see the local film guy here to get the film developed.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. My Into the Spotlight this week is a little bit different. So, this is a Toronto based creator. Her name is Kristen Stambolik. She is a dancer and video creator, and she makes these amazing rotoscoped dance videos. So, rotoscoping is essentially painting over video frame by frame to create animation overlays over videos. And she does this really cool effect where it looks like lines are coming out of the dancer's arms. So they'll move their arms in a certain way, and lines will go across the screen in this very kind of like augmented reality sort of way.
Right.
So she does some things like that, and she does other sort of like kaleidoscope effect videos where it becomes very abstract and you can't really see the dancer as a whole. And they're really amazing. I have gotten to appreciate dance so much since I've started dating Eden, and she started bringing me to like modern dance shows. It is it's such an incredible art form. I think it's actually like one of my favorite art forms. It just like the way it combines music, um, visual imagery, like the beauty of the human body and emotion. It's just all there.
Right.
Um, and every time I've gone to a dance show or see something, I'm like, it's so amazing. So yeah, she is adding another layer on top of that with dance in the form of video. So I'll link her Instagram in the show notes. It is at Kristen Stambolik. Yeah, really, really amazing, unique stuff. Check her out.
That's amazing. I mean, like you just mentioned, dance is such an awesome and powerful art form on its own. The way it combines all those elements from music to design, and also just like pure athletic as well.
Yeah.
But in a way, but combining that with rotoscoping is so cool because rotoscoping is such a beautiful technique and the visual arts. There's a really cool film by Richard Linklater called Waking Life, which is all rotoscoped, which
Oh,
I think
cool.
you might enjoy. But no, rotoscoping, especially combined with dance, like I'm really interested in seeing that. That must be so awesome. So she only does that on Instagram. She doesn't do that on YouTube.
No, I think she has Vimeo as well. I've just seen her stuff on Instagram.
Right, right.
Um, but yeah,
No, that's cool. I mean, to combine those two art forms, that's just amazing. I'm excited to check that out.
definitely. All right, man. This was a really cool conversation. I'm glad we did this.
Yeah, it was really fun. I feel like somehow we only just like touched the surface because there's just so much subject matter to delve into with this stuff. But it was fun. It was fun hearing both of our perspectives and just the projects that we're working on now and just our perspective as well. Because I think we've changed so much since like I made that first documentary, and you've grown so much since you first started your YouTube channel. It's nice. It's nice to see, and it's nice to see the elements because I think sometimes people kind of put like online video and filmmaking into two different categories. And while they are different, there's a lot of shared space there as well.
Yeah. I need to research whip pans. I want to see if how I can do those.
They're really cool. Well, you could do them. They're really, really cool.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's like I think the way you said it earlier is perfect. Like it's their languages and they're languages that work within a specific medium. And like a lot of languages you can learn things from the other and there can be all this really great crossover and cross pollination.
Exactly. I mean, it's only a matter of time until we get like the first few short films that are done in the form of like Instagram or Snapchat stories. Like it's
Yeah. Wow.
inevitable. It's inevitable. I've had an idea for one to do that, but yeah, it's like we're on that path. We're really on that
It'd
path.
be cool too because they expire. So it'd be like an in the moment experience. It's
Well,
like
yeah,
you would have to tune in live to see the full movie.
it'll be a fun type of video art. I've had an idea of how to do it, but I won't mention on this because I don't want any of you taking my ideas.
Oh my
But
god! Imagine it. You could do like a Blair Witch Project sort of horror movie where it's like
mhm.
people are going through the woods and it's the shaky cam footage, but it's all through Instagram stories. Wow!
Yeah,
If someone hasn't made that Instagram page, they should.
and like you kind of combine all different types of profiles. And when someone dies, like it goes off from their profile, and they find their phone, and it's like you see the moment when they died or something. It just could be
Yeah,
really fun that way. So, future filmmakers, get on that. We want to see that.
yeah. Come on, awesome.
Yes, yes. No, he's going to be doing something with augmented reality or virtual reality by that point.
Yeah, he'll make you feel like you're in a haunted house.
Yeah, exactly. Or we're just going to build our world to resemble haunted house.
Exactly.
Yeah. But no, this was a great episode. And yeah, many more to come.
Yes. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this, tell a friend about the show. We would really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Tell a friend. You can also reach out to us through Instagram. We have our email, or you could DM us if you have anything you want to suggest. If you're interested in being on the show, let us know. We're always looking to interview awesome, interesting, creative people.
For sure. All right, man. Have a great night.
Ciao.